SAS demonstration, exporting data. For this demonstration, we are going to look at a subset of variables from the treatment of hypertension study. And these variables relate to the severity score data that's on the study. So we are going to start by looking at the permanent SAS data set called SE score. And let's first of all just do a Proc contents of this data set and see what variables are on it. So there are 100 observations and 14 variables that are on the data set SE score. And we see here is a listing of those variables. Now I'm interested in just keeping a selection of variables from that permanent SAS data set. And I'm going to use that subset of variables and observations to show you how we can create some external files. So before I do that, I'm going to create a SAS data set called temp, and I'm bringing in the permanent SAS data set SE score. And I'm only interested in keeping patient ID, clinic, randomization date, group, education level, weight at 12 months, systolic blood pressure at 12 months, and severity score at 12 months. And I'm also going to sort my data set by patient ID because when I create these external files, I want the file, let's say it's an Excel spreadsheet, to show up so that the patients are in sorted order. So let's run this code and just look at a printout of the data set that I am then interested in exporting. So here's our 100 observations and 8 variables. So if we scroll up, we see we have 100 observations here. Now the first way to transport data, and perhaps the simplest, is by making use of the export wizard. And I refer you to the export wizard handout that's very similar to the import wizard handout that I went over with you in the very beginning of the semester. So we're going to go through how to export a SAS data set using the export wizard. So first of all, we're going to do File, and we're going to select Export Data instead of selecting Import Data. And then we are going to select either a SAS permanent or temporary data set to export. And so here I'm selecting the temporary data set temp. Notice here that if there were more than one data set, that if we had created a number of data sets, we could have selected one of those data sets. And I have the option of writing these variable labels as column names. But I have not applied any variable labels, so I'm not going to use them as column names. And then I'm going to click Next. And I'm interested in creating an Excel workbook. And I can, if I had defined formats, I can actually select this, and then a special file with my formats would also be created. But I'm not going to select the user-defined formats. And then I'm going to select Next again, and I'm going to tell SAS where to save the workbook. And optionally, if there is a current workbook with that name, then I will delete it. So I want to show where I want to save my Excel workbook. And I'm interested in saving it in week 16 external files. And I'm going to name the Excel workbook SES. And then I click on Save and OK. And then I can actually assign a name to the exported table. Normally, when you open up Excel, the table is named Sheet 1. I'm going to be calling this sheet SES. And then I'm going to click Next again. And again, as with the Import Wizard, I'm given the option to actually save the export statements. And so I'm going to, once again, press Browse. And I'm going to call the code that's automatically generated by the Export Wizard Export SES. And then I'm going to click Save and Finish. And so let's see what's happened now. First of all, we're going to take a look at the log. And we see that ses.xls was successfully created. So if we go over to my folder, Week 16 External Files, you will see here that there is now an Excel file, SES. So let's click on this file, and here is the Excel spreadsheet that was created by the Export Wizard. And notice that the sheet has the name SES because that's what we called it. Returning to SAS, let's go ahead and open the code that we saved and take a look at the code. So we had saved the code under the name Export SES. And if we open it, we see this is the code that's automatically generated by SAS when you use the Export Wizard. So if we scroll down in our program export, here we see a copy of the code that was automatically generated using the Export Wizard. But there are some other ways that we can export our data, and I'm going to show you those examples now. So another way to do that is by using Proc export, and we actually write the export code. So here we're interested in exporting data to a comma-delimited file that can also be brought into Excel. The DBMS equals option specifies the file type. The replace option tells SAS to replace any file with the same name. So here we've typed proc export, data equals, and we're again referring to our SAS dataset temp. The out file is going to be called SE, and it's going to be a CSV file, so it has a CSV extension, and we're giving it the directory. And the DBMS, which specifies the file type, we're saying the file type is CSV. And so if we run this code, this is what our file will look like on the se.sev file. So let's run this code. Again, we're not going to get any output here, but if we look at the log, we'll be able to get some information about whether the proc export created the file that we wanted it to. So we're running it. If we go over to the log, we see that this file was successfully created. So this is a second way of creating an export file that could be opened in Excel, except it's comma delimited. And we'll take a look at that file shortly. Another way that we can write our proc export is to create an Excel file directly. So here we've written the code using the utility proc export, and we've called our file se.xls, which is actually an Excel file. And notice that the DBMS option, which indicates the file type, is now set equal to Excel rather than to CSV. So if we run this code and look at the log, we see now that we have created a file se.xls, and it's saved in this directory. So we'll look in this directory after I've run all these different bits of programs and take a look at all the different files that I've created. Another way to create an external file is by using ODS. And when we use ODS, by default, SAS prints a period for any missing numeric data. So here we start with the ODS statement, similar to when we've created ODS RTF files, but here we're saying ODS CSV, so we're interested in creating a comma delimited file, and this is where we want that file written. And so we're giving it the name ses_ods.csv. And then we're just printing out our data. And then we have ODS CSV close. So when we do this proc print, every observation and all the variables from data equals temp will be printed, and they will also be written to this CSV file. And if we do not use the no obs option, then the observation numbers will also be printed on our CSV file. So let's run this code. And notice when we do the ODS, it actually immediately prints it out because we did have a proc print statement, and you can open directly the file that was created in Excel. So if we open it up, we see here that we do have a column for the observation numbers, which is added because we didn't use the no obs option. And notice that SAS automatically names the sheet SES underscore ODS. So the file is named SES underscore ODS as well as the name of the sheet. So here, if we look at our file where I've saved these data sets, you see here we have two Excel files. One was SE that we had created with the Proc export. One was the SES, which I had created with the export wizard. And then two comma delimited files. So this is an Excel comma separated file that was created with Proc export. That was the first time I used Proc export. And then this is the comma separated file that was created from ODS. So I've already showed you a number of different ways that we can create external files that can then be used by other software programs. The last example I'm going to show you is how to write a raw data file with the data step. We are going to use the file statement to tell SAS the name of the output file, and we are going to use the put statement to tell SAS what to write and where. So we're creating a new data set called data underscore null underscore. And as I've mentioned before, the underscore null underscore is a special keyword that tells SAS not to make a new SAS data set. You cannot use this data set in procedures. It's just used for processing. So we're calling this data set underscore null underscore, and we're bringing in the SAS data set called temp. And then we're saying file, and this is where we want to write our raw data file, and we're giving it the name SES underscore raw1. And the variables that we want on our file are going to be clinic, education, group, patient ID, randomization date, and we want the date 9 format attached to randomization date. So let's run this code and see what we find here. Again, there's no output generated. If we look at our log, it does say that 100 records were written to this file. And then if we go and look at the folder where I've saved this file, you see here we have a DAT file, so it's no longer an Excel spreadsheet or a comma delimited file. And if we open up this file, notice here that our randomization date is in the 9 dot format. What would happen if we had assigned no date format? If we had assigned no date format at all, we just had the put statement and listed the variables, then the format would be MMDDYY10 dot for the variable ran date. And the reason is that that was the format that was on the original data set. And so it's going to use the original format unless we give a different format when we use our put statement. So let's run this code, and we're going to create a second data set called SES underscore raw2.dat. And now if we go again and look at the folder, we now have another DAT file, SES underscore raw2. And if we click on it, you now see that our format is the MMDDYY10 dot format. Now, as a last example, let's say we didn't want any format at all. We just wanted the numeric value. That is the number of days relative to January 1st, 1960 for our date, ran date. So if we wanted to create a raw data file where we have the numeric value, then we have our put statement, and we use this format statement, and we just list the variable name. So to print a variable without an assigned permanent format, use the format statement with no format indicated. So let's run this code, and look at the log again. And so we've created now a third raw data file. If we look at that, we see here that now randomization date is shown as the numeric value relative to January 1st, 1960. So we've looked at a number of different ways that we can take a SAS data set and create a file that then can be used by other software programs, such as Excel or creating a raw data file. This completes the SAS demonstration on exporting data.